Welcome to the Perinatal Wellbeing Podcast. I'm Christine, your host and certified perinatal mental health professional. This podcast is all about authentic conversations. We want to open up the discussions around perinatal health and well-being, from mood and anxiety disorders to breastfeeding to grief and loss in the perinatal period, and everything in between. While this is not therapy or medical advice, it is the place where we are going to continue to open up the discussion around all things perinatal mental, physical, emotional, and sexual health to help reduce stigma and break down these barriers to support. Hi, Alesha. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Me too, Alesha. I am so excited because we connected and we were talking about kind of supports for parents with disabilities and supports for parents, struggling with mental health issues and how those connect or unfortunately don't connect and in service provision. And I wanted to have you on the podcast to talk about something that I think we do not talk about enough.
Definitely agree. I don't think there's enough people talking about, parents with disabilities. I believe I read the statistic not that long ago is like 1 in 10 children have a disabled parent, but yet nobody's talking about it.
Right, which is not a small number.
No, I hope that I'm able in my lifetime to reach out to as many disabled parents as humanly possible to kind of help connect the dots and weave the web of support together because it's so needed.
Yes, absolutely. So why don't you share with the audience first a bit about yourself and your parenting journey?
So my name is Alesha, of course. I have cerebral palsy, spastic diplegia. I use a wheelchair for mobility. I used to walk in a walker when I was younger, but then as I got older, my energy expenditure was 3 to 5 times the normal, and I had to decide for myself what I was going to do to kind of conserve my energy. So now I use both a manual wheelchair or a power wheelchair full time. My son Nolan is 3.5. He'll be 4 in March. And I started on this parenting journey. First of all, I was very private about my pregnancy because I was so concerned with the stigma of being disabled and pregnant. And even though it was something that I so wanted, I was kind of afraid to come out to like social media that I was pregnant because I just didn't know like kind of the response that I was going to get. And looking back on it, I really wish I had been a lot more open about it. But I think at the time I was just so concerned that I just wanted to stay, quiet about it. And like I said, looking back now, I really wish I was open about it just because there is so much stigma with being disabled and pregnant. And I really feel like that's a barrier that needs to be, deconstructed because, your ability to walk or do whatever X activity or like whatever you may struggle with doesn't define your ability to parent. Just because I use a wheelchair and have physical limitations and have cerebral palsy doesn't mean I can't be a good parent. Right. And so when Nolan was a little over a year old, I started a YouTube channel for Adaptive Parent Project, kind of sharing my journey and a bunch of like adaptive techniques that I had learned because I realized that there was not many people sharing adaptive parenting techniques and things like that. And I wanted to be able to help other parents. And then I applied for the Airy Real Changemakers contest in 2021. And out of over 600 applicants, I ended up making the top 20. So then I was gifted $20,000 to launch my project. Fast forward through months of trying to figure everything out, and we became an official 501c3 nonprofit. And we're dedicated to empowering parents with disabilities. And now we have an organization website, and we share resources and healthcare providers and baby wearing educators, and basically anything you could think of that would help a parent with a disability. We want to be an all-inclusive resource so that families have the tools they need to thrive.
Right, which is amazing. And I am going to link everything in the show notes so that people can check out the YouTube channel, check out the website, even like your Instagram as well, because like I love seeing your videos on there. I think they're so great and innovative too, right? Like being able to share with people how you can adapt, right? Parenting techniques and things to help. And it's a great resource.
But I think that's the awesome thing about Adaptive Parent Project too, is it's not just me. Like, I connect with parents literally all over the world. And sometimes it can be hard to get parents to contribute videos because they may not feel comfortable being on camera, or, they may video recording and things like that can be difficult. But the point of Adaptive Parent Project is to be an all-inclusive resource. So I don't want it to just be me sharing my experience. I want every parent around the world with all different types of disabilities to be sharing what they're doing and what helped them. And we're in the middle of making a product resource guide where we have like actual pictures of parents using different products and like how it helped them and why it helped them. Because especially as a parent with a disability, you buy something, try it, doesn't work, you send it back. And I realized every parent goes through this. But when you have a disability, there's a whole nother layer of accessibility and a whole nother layer of like needing to be able to do things independently. So there's like so much more involved than like your average able-bodied parent who, could technically use any wrapper carrier, whether it be, a little more challenging or not. So we just really want to be there and empower all parents to know that we're creating a community that even if you're in Italy or in Germany or in Iran, like we're here for you, and we're going to help everybody everywhere and be a really strong, tight-knit community.
Yes, I love that. And so, I know we do have listeners around the world. And so if anyone's listening and you're a parent with disabilities, please reach out to Alesha, check out the website, send in videos, helping, like you said, parents with all different abilities and different disabilities in terms of how you adapt to your parenting and the things that you do that help you with the day-to-day parenting.
We're also hopefully in the very near future going to be starting a mentor program. Adaptive Parent Project really strives to start a mentor program, not only for parents, but also for healthcare providers, so that healthcare providers can be more informed about working with people with disabilities and also working with parents with disabilities. So, we have a long project going on, like things are going to take time, but stick with us. We're going to get there. We're building from the ground up, and we're building something that hasn't existed before. So it's, of course, not as fast as I would like everything to be, but just hang in there with us. We're getting there. I promise this is going to be a fantastic journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm so excited to see it all unfold. And so I'm curious, Alesha, what was your experience like going into pregnancy and parenthood with a disability? Do you want to talk about those challenges that you faced?
For me, it was really important to make sure that I had a team that was comfortable taking care of me. Like, for example, my maternal fetal medicine physician, Dr. Andrew Hull at the University of California, San Diego, is the head of the maternal fetal medicine department for UCSD. So when I met with him, he was like, you have cerebral palsy. It's not going to be that big of a deal. Like, let's have a baby. We're going to make this work. So he was really comfortable taking care of me. Now, of course, when I ended up having to deliver, he was on his way to LA to pick up a colleague. So, things got a little bit complicated. as far as like being able to have Nolan's father in the room, because I had to undergo general anesthesia because I have a baclofen pump placed to help my spasticity. And so the original plan the whole time was to allow Brian to be in the operating room because he is a nurse at UCSD and is very comfortable with that. But of course, at the last minute, the team that was delivering me, because my blood pressure started going up and I started developing preeclampsia. So they didn't consider it an emergent situation, but rather an urgent situation. So they wanted to deliver me quickly. And so within getting to the hospital, Nolan was born within 3 hours, but because we had a different team, they weren't comfortable with his dad staying in the operating room. So by like some saving grace, UCSD has a volunteer doula program, and they were able to call a doula. And within 10 minutes before I went back to the operating room to have Nolan, the doula was able to show up and she was able to get pictures and video of the whole thing, because nobody plans for both parents to miss their child's birth. Like nobody wants that. And so they weren't comfortable with Brian being in the operating room, but they were fine with the doula being in there. And I felt so fortunate because since it's a volunteer program, it's a first come, first serve basis. So if they're already with somebody, you're basically out of luck. But the stars aligned, everything worked out. Nolan was safe, everything worked out for the best. And of course, it wasn't what I planned as far as like the delivery journey, but everything worked out. My medical team was fantastic the entire time, from working with my OB to the rest of the team. I never really felt like the odd one out, which was something that was really important to me. And they were just, it was like me having a disability in a maternal fetal medicine office was fantastic because it was like no big deal.
Right.
Which is something that was really important to me. So, if you're a parent with a disability and wanting to have a child and trying to plan your, parenthood journey, if you can talk to everybody beforehand and try to like figure out who your team is going to be and what you're going to do ahead of time, definitely trying to get the most comprehensive team possible and get everybody on board is definitely recommended. I realize that's not an option for everybody, but just surround yourself with people that are, supportive of you. And if you are with a provider that you don't feel like is supportive to your journey, then my best advice would be to find somebody else, because there are plenty of physicians out there that feel comfortable treating people with disabilities. And so it's just about creating the best care plan you can for yourself and for baby.
Right, absolutely. And so what was your postpartum recovery and journey? What was that like for you?
The first like 24, 48 hours was really hard because I was on magnesium to help with my blood pressure. And so basically it feels like you're extremely heavily intoxicated and have the flu at the exact same time, which is something I have never felt before. And so, I really struggle because I don't remember a lot of the first like 24 to 48 hours, because you have to be on this magnesium drip for like 24 hours straight, and they only allow you like very, very minimal liquids like the entire time. So like you're trying to start breastfeeding and you're like super thirsty, but they won't let you have water. And so, like I struggle with that, but luckily Brian, Nolan's dad, was able to take video of the first time of me meeting him, because I don't even think I met him until like I gave birth at 7:04 p.m. And I don't even think I met Nolan until like around midnight, until I got out of recovery. Obviously his dad and everything was with him, so he was safe. But I'm grateful that I have video of that, because I like don't remember it unless I see that video.
Yeah.
So, that first part was really challenging, but like even in the hospital, I was there for 6 days because I have a history of high blood pressure prior to pregnancy, and like my body was just going really wonky like for that whole 6 days that they were trying to manage my blood pressure, because at night, every night it kept spiking, and so they were having to like bring it down, and they were telling me that I might have to go back on magnesium. And so it was like this whole thing, and I had to switch hospital rooms during my stay because the hospital room that they initially put me in had a step in the shower. Now, why in the world in this hospital that was just built a few years ago, you would put steps in a shower for a postpartum care unit? I have no idea. But like, even those things, have to be like thought about. So we ended up having to move rooms so that I could have an accessible shower, because obviously I was there long enough where like showering and all that was needed. So I felt like my postpartum care journey in the hospital was really good overall. But to be honest with you, like I did have a few nurses that were like terrified of me being a parent, and like they wouldn't leave my side when I was holding Nolan because they were afraid I was going to drop him. And actually, a really interesting story is, we were going to go for a walk in the halls as a family one day. And so I was holding Nolan and I was sitting in my wheelchair, and Brian was pushing my wheelchair. And I like go to exit my room, and like everybody is giving me like this death glare. And I'm like looking, going like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what is happening? And so all these nurses are like looking at each other like, who's going to tell her? And I'm like looking at them like, what are we going to tell me? And they're like, you can't do that. And I was like, can't do what? They're like, the baby has to be like in the bassinet like the entire time. Well, of course they have all these things around the hospital room that say like safe sleep and all these things, but on the back of the birth stats card, the card that tells you like the time of birth and like what your baby weighs and how long they are, there's like fine print that says like baby must remain in bassinet at all times. Though I don't know who in the world is going to read the back of the birth stats card, because I did not.
I never read it.
And I don't think a lot of people do, but it was like cracking me up, because I'm like, they have all these things about safe sleep and all these other things, but they don't say like, baby has to stay in bassinet. So, there was definitely some like judgment from people, but, I think overall it was a really good experience. And honestly, if you can deliver at like a teaching hospital, I think that's your best bet, because that's where people are learning and, they have the most expertise. So, like overall, my experience was fantastic. And honestly, I live in San Diego, California. If I was to ever have another child, like I couldn't imagine delivering anywhere else.
Right. And I'm glad to hear that. And it's so interesting, like you said, even the one step in the shower, right? And thinking about accessibility and how I think so many of us take it for granted. And so what did you face in terms of like wanting to have a baby and becoming pregnant? Like before you had a baby, what was the stigma that you saw or were aware of, towards parents with disabilities?
I mean, a lot of people in general, I just think that if you have a disability, you shouldn't really be having children. And that I just think like there's not that much support. And I only knew I think I knew 2 parents prior to getting pregnant with a disability that I like knew of. And so there's just not that much support just in general. So it was hard because, able-bodied parents, they can like call up their friend and be like, hey, like, how did you figure this out? And of course I can do that like with my friends that are parents and able-bodied, like if it's like something behavior related or something like that. But there was nobody to like share in the physical struggle of trying to figure things out, because I remember calling my mom on the phone and crying to her on the phone, like trying to figure out how to adapt for Nolan, but like my body could not adapt as fast as my mama bear brain wanted me to. And that provoked a lot of like anxiety for me, because I wanted to figure it out, and I wanted to figure it out like right now. And,
Right.
Sometimes figuring something out right away isn't possible. And so that was like a really big source of like anxiety and fear for how I was going to figure everything out, and so and I wanted to make sure I could do things as independently as possible. You're kind of like, it's kind of like a horse race. Like you want to come out of the gate running, but you just had major abdominal surgery. And so you're kind of like limping on the racetrack.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then trying to recover from that and care for a newborn and not as much sleep. And, it's
Yeah.
so hard, right? Yeah.
Especially not as much sleep for myself personally, having CP, like not having enough sleep, like really affects me. So, I have to be careful with my transfers and, not falling and all those things. And so it's a lot.
Right, right, absolutely. And so what kind of support, if any, did you have for parenting after having Nolan? Was there anything available to you?
I think the biggest thing and the most important thing that was available to me was our public health nurse through San Diego County. We were actually referred, I think it was by one of the social workers at the hospital. And nobody actually told me until like I got a call from the county, and they're like, hey, do you want to be in this program? And we do home visits and like check on you. And I was like, yes, that's great, because I don't drive. So having a public health nurse, since Nolan was born 4 weeks early, he was born at 36 weeks. I was really excited to have somebody come to the house. But at the same time, it was kind of weird because I was like, I got referred to this program because like you're usually referred through the hospital, but yet nobody told me. And so, I didn't find out till much later that it was a social worker that ended up referring us when I asked, like, who put in this referral. But I found it interesting that nobody had a conversation with me like, hey, we referred you to this program because we think it might help. It was
Right.
more like, we're doing this secretly because you're disabled and we think you need it, kind of thing. Does
Yeah,
that make
totally. Because I was going to say, well, no one even asked you, do you want to be referred to this program?
Yeah.
Because, like, what if you felt like, no, I don't think I really need that?
Yeah.
You
I
might
mean, I
not
don't know any first time moms that would like, say no, but
turn it
it would
down.
have
Yeah.
been nice to know like, hey, you'll be getting a call from this person and they can really help.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And knowing,
So
okay, that support is coming.
yeah. And so the great thing about it now is Nolan's public health nurse, when Nolan was like 16 months old, took a different job. So I was able to connect with her, and stay friends with her. And now she's actually on my board, and like it's fantastic. And like I'm so glad that our paths crossed, because I cannot imagine not having her in my life. And she just gave birth to her first daughter in September. And so I remember when, we were talking and she was talking about how much she wanted a family when Nolan was a baby. And so to see her go through her pregnancy journey and like have her support, and her being so supportive of Adaptive Parent Project, like I am so grateful that I was referred to that program, because I now have what I feel like is going to be a lifelong friendship with this person. That, sometimes you meet somebody and you just connect and you're going to be friends for life, kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Totally. Absolutely. I love that. And so, for those parents that are listening who are able-bodied and don't kind of think about parenting with a disability, can you share with us some of those challenges that you have faced or are facing with Nolan now that he's here?
I think a lot of the biggest things I face is like, we live down the street from a park. We specifically sought out that house because it was close to a park. So like I thought I would be able to, walk Nolan to the park by this age, but Nolan has some sensory processing challenges, and most likely ADHD. And so I can't take him to the park independently because he could run out into the street even if he's on a harness. So I think it's just, if you're an able-bodied parent and you meet a disabled parent with a disability and you end up hitting it off, like befriend them, like offer to help, offer to meet up with play dates, because like that's the biggest thing for me right now is I like, especially with COVID, and Mindy, who was our public health nurse and is now a really close, friend of ours, she's moving out of state in the beginning of the year. So it's like, if you meet a parent with a disability and you guys hit it off, like befriend them, exchange numbers, like offer to meet up with play dates, because especially in my situation, since I don't drive, I'm still extremely isolated. Like I wish I had a group of like disabled moms to hang out with, and like, or just moms in general, like that don't judge me for being disabled. Like some parents, a really interesting story is like, before COVID hit, when Nolan was really young, before he was a year, we went to several baby sign language classes, like several weeks of them. There was like 3 different sessions of like 8 weeks. And in the beginning, like, a lot of us parents were all in it together. And in the beginning, there was like, it was always really interesting because there were a group of parents that were like comfortable with me right away. And then there were the group of parents that like didn't know what to say, didn't know how to approach me, like anything like that. And so even being like a disabled parent in like a mommy and me type class can be really hard because, people don't relate to you exactly like they do another able-bodied parent. And so it can just really be a challenge. And that's why we want to start the mentor program, is because we want parents to feel like, even if another parent is in a different state or in a different city or whatever it may be, that they can reach out and have somebody connect to with like similar abilities, that understands like, hey, I'm in a wheelchair and it's really hard to get my kid off the floor, or, hey, I'm trying to, figure out how to feed them now that they don't want to sit in a high chair and they're running around and I'm chasing them. Like there's a different dynamic of like things you have to figure out. And sometimes it would be really nice to have a sounding board of somebody that understands that, because obviously an able-bodied parent that's not disabled isn't going to relate to those struggles. Like, yes, you can relate to common parenting struggles, but there's a whole different subset of struggles as a physically disabled parent that you go through,
Right.
that people don't connect with necessarily.
Right.
So it's just, it sucks that it's so isolating, because you're not the only one out there, but like we're so spread out that it's hard. And several months ago, earlier this year, we're in obviously 2022 now, earlier in 2022, I got to meet up with Danny Ize, the quad mom with twins that lives in Virginia, who has her amazing film, Danny's Twins, that's touring a bunch of film festivals and winning all sorts of awards. And she actually works for a company here in San Diego, so she had to come out for some training. And we got to have dinner together. And even though we have different disabilities and she has a spinal cord injury and I have cerebral palsy, like honestly, going to dinner with her was like one of the best experiences in my motherhood journey. Like so far, like I feel like I could have cried that entire dinner, like having someone that understands my struggles, like right next to me. And I mean, she does it with twins. I can't imagine having 2 of Nolan with his energy level and his sensory processing needs and all of that. But like, it was just, I can't tell you how refreshing and how amazing it was to be able to be face to face having dinner with another disabled parent that also, because she's a quadriplegic, she also has, impairment in her upper body. And so, struggles with things like that. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences I could have ever asked for. And it sucks that we're so spread out, because, if we were neighbors, we'd be hanging out every day.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so it sounds to me like what can be helpful is for example, those like mom and baby groups, parent baby groups, like being more inclusive, people, doing their part to reach out to parents with disabilities and to include them in activities and to like, you know, like you said, organize play dates and help with that isolation. And then
Yeah, and ask them
also,
what their access needs are and what's easiest for them. Like
yeah,
you don't have to know someone's disability to ask what their access needs are. Like,
of course.
a lot of people are curious and want to know what everybody's disability is, but somebody may not be comfortable sharing that. But just say like, hey, what are your accessibility needs? Like, how can we best accommodate you? Like,
Right.
that is one of the best questions you could ask anybody with a disability, whether they're a parent or not.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And so, and then also, I think too, it sounds like maybe trying to have more groups or any groups for parents, specifically for parents with disabilities, to be able to connect and have that common ground. And yeah, hey, me too. I struggle with that too. And oh my gosh, yeah, that thing is so hard. And I really relate and I really understand that because I have similar struggles.
Right. I wish there were like maternal mental health groups that did this as well. Like, I
Yeah.
definitely want to reach out to Postpartum Support International and see if I can partner with them. Like, because
Yeah.
I feel like anxiety can be so much more prevalent for parents with disabilities. Like, along with postpartum depression and all of that, like, there's so much more anxiety that comes with like needing to provide for your child. And like, for example, this is a perfect example. About 2-3 weeks ago, I actually fell getting out of bed, and it was the first time as an adult with a disability that I fell and was not able to get myself back up because years prior to having Nolan, and while I was pregnant with Nolan, I was going to the gym 3 or 4 days a week. Well, then COVID hit, and obviously all that changed. And then being a mom, obviously I don't have that much free time to commit to going to an adaptive gym and doing all those things. And to be honest with you, like, falling and not being able to get myself up and having to have my mom come and help me was definitely like an oh crap moment. And I think that really parenting has shaped for me differently how I advocate for myself now, because there's definitely like a bigger sense of urgency with a lot of things, in the sense of like, if it affects Nolan in any way, if it's something that I need help with that like affects Nolan in any way, like, there's a bigger sense of urgency. Like, I immediately messaged my care team and was like, hey, I felt like I need to do at home PT to like work on my transfers and work on getting up from the floor, because I had never had the problem of not being able to get back up. And so it was like, oh crap, we need to fix this. So I think as like, a parent with a disability, it really helps me strongly advocate for Nolan and the things that he needs, but it also has changed the advocacy for myself, because if it's something that affects my ability to like care for him, like, I have to make sure that like I'm on top of it, and like that it's like immediately addressed. And I think healthcare providers can often think it's coming off as like being pushy or being too like invasive, or just like being rude, but really we're not trying to be rude. It's that when something happens to you and you have a child that relies on you for their every need, like, if something is affecting you and your disability and your ability to care for your child, like, that immediately needs to be addressed.
Yes.
So it's definitely changed like my advocacy both for myself and for him. But it also, like, me being a parent with a disability, it makes me really proud of like the advocacy that was instilled in me as a child, because that really comes out now. And like, I definitely like speak my mind, and I definitely like hold my ground. And I think if I hadn't been disabled my whole life, it probably wouldn't be that way.
Right.
So
Right.
that's something that I really, really like appreciate as a person, is
Yeah.
like my strong advocacy skills, not only for myself, but for my son.
Right. Right. Which is so important, especially, you know, wherever we live, I know you're in California, you're in the States, I'm in Canada, so our healthcare systems are a bit different, but
Yeah.
that advocacy piece is so important. I talk about that a lot, if I have clients who've had, for example, traumatic delivery and they're going in to have another baby, and how can you advocate for yourself in delivery, and even with mostly I deal with mental health struggles. And so if you're having mental health struggles, how can you advocate for yourself? How can you ask for what you need, or talk to your doctor about options and things like that? Like, those things are really important. And you're right, it's a skill, right? It
Yeah.
is a skill. And so you've honed that skill, which is, amazing, right? And I think it's so important. And kind of on that same note, what do you feel are those things that you bring into parenting in a positive sense that you feel help you in your parenting that an able-bodied parent might not bring into their parenting?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I feel like I'm teaching empathy and compassion right from the beginning. My son knows no different.
Right.
And so he's learning, we're constantly reminding him, mama's slow, mama doesn't walk, we have to do this first so mama doesn't fall, like all these things. But not only empathy and compassion for him, but just my constant ability to be able to adapt, and like being so used to like adapting to situations. Like when he was first born, it was really hard because like, my brain wasn't like adapting as quickly as I wanted it to. But as a parent with a disability now, like I love that I'm able to adapt. I love that, if we play a game together, he comes and sits in my lap, or like, he climbs up in my chair, like those things, that's second nature to him. And so my lap is like his safe space. And of course, like all parents, their kids usually love to sit on their lap at some point, but for us it's just a little bit different,
Yep.
because I don't walk. And so, that's just, it's a different safe space. And he's 3.5 and I'm still breastfeeding. So, it's, I'm definitely his safe space for a lot of things. And so I just feel like, I don't know, I mean, for a lack of a better way to say it, I just feel like being a parent with a disability is like amazing. Like, of course, being a parent at all is
Yeah.
amazing, and you learn so much through the eyes of your kids, but like seeing his compassion and understanding and empathy for other people, and like knowing that he's learning that from the beginning, and like all these things, it's just like it's kind of mind blowing, to be honest. And it's just like, it's so cool that I get to play a part in helping raise a human that's gonna make the world a better place.
Yes.
um
Yes.
and have that experience. And just, I mean, of course things have to be taught to him, but his experience with disability is lived, and so I think it's different than teaching just any kid that has like able-bodied parents. And of course this is nothing against like able-bodied parents, but it's just really cool to see. Like it's something that you just kind of sit back and you're just like, yeah, that's awesome.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, like you said too about being able to adapt, right, is so big, because I think there's so much of that in parenting in general where we're just constantly letting go of control and like just trying to figure things out, like how do I do this? And so that ability to adapt, that, it sounds like it's fine-tuned for you, right? Where some
Right.
other people it might not be. And
Right.
so that's incredible. And absolutely, like Nolan being able to, learn firsthand, how we care for others and have empathy and think, about other people and in the activities he's doing, or how do we adapt this for mama? And I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yes. And so what are the challenges you think, or you face now that Nolan's getting, a bit older? So now he's, coming into, being 4 and out of the baby phase, obviously very mobile. And so what is that like for you?
I think the hardest thing for me right now is, given that Nolan has sensory processing challenges, and like, for example, he receives physical therapy and occupational therapy at home, and that's something that I had to advocate very, very strongly for, because he is extremely vocal and, doesn't display like signs of autism. But I had to really, really advocate and be like, hey, something is going on here. But hands down, without a doubt, the hardest thing for me right now is the fact that I physically cannot meet all of his sensory needs and his needs to wrestle and crash and do all these things. Like, as we're talking, he is literally in a kid's play gym, like jumping and climbing ropes. And that's something he's doing with his dad, because obviously I can't go into a gym like that and do those things with him. And honestly, as a disabled parent, it breaks my heart, because I want to be able to meet his needs. And the fact that I can't go into the backyard and chase him, and I can't help him climb really tall structures and help him get down. I think that's the biggest thing for me right now, is like not being able to keep up with his physical needs. So like, obviously when I'm home alone with him on the days that his dad's works, like, we have to do things in the house, and because I don't drive, and because of his like attention and not necessarily listening and cooperating, which a lot of toddlers do, like, I can't go out with him like on my own, just because it's like not safe for either of us. And that part really, really, I struggle with emotionally, and it makes me, it like deeply saddens me, because I want to be able to do those things with him. And I thought, with him understanding that I'm disabled, like, of course no one goes into a pregnancy going, yes, my child's going to have sensory processing challenges and may have ADHD. Like, nobody plans for that. But I think having a child with those, high energy needs and having a disability is really hard, because I can't even seem to find parents with disabilities that have kids with these high energy needs. And I feel very left out, like extremely isolated on that front, even now, because I just can't keep up with his needs. And I realize and accept that it's okay to need help for now, and that hopefully as he gets older, he'll learn to channel that energy, and we'll be able to safely walk to the park together. And, he'll listen to me when I say, it's time to come home, or you can't do that. But right now, he's a toddler. He doesn't listen. It's just kind of a free for all. And so that 100% is like the hardest thing for me, because when we're home alone, he's really pretty good about listening. I mean, he will push my buttons, and he'll do certain things that he knows, like if he wants something, he'll like go hide in a corner that he knows that I can't reach him. But we do our best. And but it's just, yeah, not feeling like I can keep up with his physical needs. Obviously I make sure that other people are able to help him and that his needs are met. So I'm not neglecting my child in any way. Like, I hope that nobody listening to this podcast feels that way. But it's hard that I myself cannot physically keep up with him. Like, he's the kid that's like constantly, jumping on the trampoline, jumping off the couch, any of those things. So he's just like constant motion. Like, I can't even sit on the couch during the day when he's awake, because he's just like running around from room to room. And so like I can't rest for like a second. Like, I was proud of him yesterday, because we were on our own, and he actually gave me 5 minutes to go to the bathroom without following me. And I gave him a snack, and he stayed on the couch and ate it. And it's not him following me that I mind. Like, if he wants to follow me, that's fine. But he'll like go in our room and start climbing things and like get in areas where I can't reach him. And so it's like, but I was like, I'm very proud of you for listening and staying on the couch so I could go to the bathroom. I mean, something as simple as like, there are days that are so crazy that if I'm on my own with him, and like my mom's not able to come, like my mom had to leave early yesterday because she had a doctor's appointment. Like, the fact that I was able to use the bathroom independently, being home alone with him, is like huge. Like, that's not even something an able-bodied parent would like bat an eye at. Like, yeah,
Right.
your kid follows you. Yeah, that's fine. But like, if I'm using the restroom, like, I can't jump off the toilet and grab him if he's like climbing on top of a dresser. Like,
Right.
so those are things that the average person doesn't think about. So
Absolutely.
that's definitely my biggest struggle right now, is like being able to keep up with like his physical needs, and making sure that he gets as much energy out as possible constantly.
And
But
in a safe way for you and for him when
yeah,
it's days that you're home alone with him.
right.
Yeah.
Because right now he has no safety awareness. So
Right.
like, even in our backyard, he'll like try to climb the fence, and like behind our house is like a drainage ditch. So if I go out in the backyard with him, like I have to make sure somebody else is at my house just in case anything happens, because obviously I can't be climbing fences. Like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, it's like that planning ahead, or that it can't necessarily be like a spontaneous, like, let's just go in the backyard or let's go to the park. Like it has to be planned out and have other people there to support.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I always try to remind myself, like, this isn't forever. And just because I can't meet his physical needs right now, like, doesn't mean I'm a bad parent, because,
Mhm.
like, emotionally, it pulls at my heartstrings that I'm, like, not able to do that for him. Like, yesterday, he asked me to go in the backyard. And I was like, buddy, we can't go in the backyard right now because it's just you and mama, and it's not safe until you get, a little bit older. But, like, as a parent, like, that kills me. It sucks.
Right. Yeah, it's so hard. And it sounds like, so that is like another layer, right? Of, okay, being a parent with a disability, but then that intersection of, and what if I'm parenting a child with a disability or sensory processing issues, or, mental health issues, whatever the case may be.
Right.
That's like another added layer.
Yeah. Like, it would almost, honestly, in all like respect of every, I don't even know how to say this, but it would almost be easier if he had like a physical disability, because that I could manage easier than him having like really high energy and sensory needs. Like, and
Right.
my energy expenditure is 3 to 5 times the normal. So at the end of every day, like, I'm exhausted, like literally exhausted.
Right. And so I'm wondering too, are there supports out there for someone, in a similar situation, like a parent with a disability who is parenting a child with, for example, sensory processing issues, potential
No,
ADHD? Right.
I like, this is going to sound very strange of me to say, but as much as I'm grateful that he's not on the spectrum, I wish more than anything on this earth that we could have that diagnosis, even temporarily, to get him the support that he needs. Because once he turned 3, he only got early intervention for 10 weeks, for 2.5 months before he turned 3.
Wow.
Because I had to fight so hard for it. And they're like, well, he's not scoring high enough. And I was like, but there are clearly things going on. Like, I knew from the time he was 18 months old. And it was hard because Brian, his dad, didn't necessarily agree. So he was like angry with me for like pursuing these things. And I was just like, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for him.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so, it's hard because Nolan is very verbal, and he's very, very, very intelligent. Like, and I'm not just saying that because he's my kid. Like,
Yeah.
he like is fascinated lately with watching YouTube videos of like people fixing the LED lights in inflatable blow ups for like Christmas and Halloween. Like, he
Right.
will talk about, flux and capacity and things that you wouldn't think a 3.5-year-old is going to be talking about. And so there really is this huge disconnect for us, that because he is so quote unquote functional, there's no support for us. And so I'm like visiting every avenue trying to get that support, but there's just not. But then you also have to be mindful, because you have to frame it in a way where you don't want agencies and things like that to think you're incapable, because of course that's going to happen, where they're going to be like, oh, well, you can't manage your kids, so what do we do now, kind of thing. But yeah, there is absolutely no support that I know of. If anybody knows of anything, please tell me. I am like desperately like grasping at straws to find something.
Right.
But yeah, there is no support, and it sucks. It really sucks.
Absolutely. And it's so tough, and it's a similar situation for us here in Ontario, and just in terms of accessing services for kids with ADHD, for example. And my kids have ADHD, 2 out of 3 of them, and I do too. And so it's, from that piece, I understand like how hard it is to access services, even in schools. Like the support is not where it needs to be. The support is not there. And
Yeah.
it's so hard and so frustrating. And that feeling like I can't meet my kids, intellectual needs, right? Like I can't be the parent that sits down and does extra work with them so that they can stay on top of work. And then I feel guilty about that. Right. And it's,
Right.
it's just so layered and complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you add a physical disability on top of that, and it's just
Right.
like there's so much intersection and so much like trying to figure everything out. And I think, but that's something that has like really, I am passionate about advocating for him. And I think as a disabled parent that's been so used to advocacy, I'm just like, I'm not taking no for an answer. Like, we're going to
Right.
find something.
Yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to get the support that we need, that he
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you kind of touched on that. And so I'm curious whether you want to share about, stigma or ableism that you've been like kind of subject to, or the people around you that you've seen, around being a parent with a disability as you continue on this parenting journey. How has, stigma and ableism impacted you?
Oh, it's definitely impacted me on so many levels. Like the fact that it's 2022 right now as we're talking, and there's so much ableism, not only in the United States, but around the entire world. Honestly, it's disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely atrocious. And it's like the stigma of parents with disabilities and people with disabilities wanting to have children. Like Wheelchair Rapunzel, who I follow on Instagram, she has tons of followers, I think like over 150,000. She has spinal muscular atrophy, also known as SMA, and she's currently 21 weeks pregnant, and she will post comments from people. She actually did a great one the other day, and over her photo put in the stigma, because this commenter was saying that because she's disabled, she shouldn't even be having sex, let alone having a child, and that it wasn't fair to her child. And there's just so much negative connotation around being disabled and choosing to have a child. And it's gross, because there are so many parents in the world that we may think, struggle to be parents, people with substance abuse issues and different, untreated mental health disorders. Or there's plenty of people that you look and you question, whether they're doing their best parenting job. And there's a lot of kids that end up in foster care. And it's like people have this automatic assumption thinking that like having a disability bars you from, entering this like club of parenthood or something like that. And somebody responded to this commenter's comment and was like, do you understand like how much of a mental load there is in parenting? And, like, yes, their labor split may look different, but just because, Alex is disabled doesn't mean she can't be a good parent. Like, I don't know, like, it's as if somebody created like this invisible like checklist of like, you must be able to walk in order to have a child, or you must be able to do XYZ task in order to be accepted in society as a parent. But like Nina Tame, who I also follow from the UK, who has spina bifida, who also has a child with a disability, who is a brilliant mind, and I would give anything to meet her in person. Like, she posted something, I believe it was yesterday, that like my wheelchair doesn't affect my ability to like parent. It gives me like freedom and allows me to be able to do things. Like, I don't know where people get off thinking like, oh, because this person has a disability, they're incapable of raising a child. Like, there is so much more as a parent with a disability that I am teaching my child from the very beginning, from, you know, the time he was born, that like able-bodied parents may never touch on ever.
Yep.
And I'm sure there's a lot of things as a disabled parent I may never touch on, but like this whole idea of like people with disabilities not being able to be parents is just like, where the hell did we get this idea? Like, it's weird and bizarre, and why?
Right. And that's, it's so, I'm flabbergasted because it's like, yeah, where does this come from? And I know we're probably can't answer that right here, but, maybe doing some research, but like, do you have any insight into like why you think people think this way?
A lot of it has to do, I think, with ableism and the fact that, we're trying to create like as much of a like perfect society as, we can. And, we think of disabled people as, disposable. And I mean, it's even clear with, COVID, and in the beginning when things were really bad, like there were literally disabled people dying. Like, there was this huge story in the news of this father, I believe they live in Texas, but like it was when there was like a ventilator shortage, and like they chose, an able-bodied person's life over his, and he was a father of 5 kids, and it was like,
Oh,
well,
God.
why is his life any less meaningful because he's disabled? Like, you literally chose an able-bodied person over him
Right.
because of his disability. And so it was like in the news and all these things. But I also think that people just aren't open-minded enough to realize like not everything has to be done the same way.
Right. Exactly. And I think that speaks so much to, adaptive parenting and adaptive parenting project, right? Of I can still, have a baby and I can still raise a child and I can still teach my kid all these things and I can do it in a different way, right? Like
Yeah,
you said,
exactly.
it's like thinking of people having to check off, certain things to be a parent, so to speak, right? We have to
Yeah,
fit in a certain box, right? And that's just
yeah,
not true.
yeah.
And so I like to ask this question whenever I'm talking about an issue on the podcast, but it's a big one. But what do you want to see change? And how do we where do we start? How do we help with this issue? And, I know it's a big one, but what do you want to see change in this world?
I want to see inclusivity for everybody and universal design everywhere. Like, people have this thing where they're like, oh, making something accessible is so expensive, but it's like, making something accessible just means that everybody can use it. It's not like an able-bodied person isn't able to walk up a ramp.
Right.
Like, there just needs to be more inclusion. And like, that's why I love like accessible playgrounds. But it's like, you have to go to these places to like, find an accessible playground, and not every playground is accessible. Just like, make everything inclusive to everybody. Like, stop, you know hating on people because they're disabled. Like,
Right.
it's dumb and antiquated. Like, it's
Yeah.
not necessary. Like, that's why, I mean, this is a huge part of the reason why I started Adaptive Parent Project, because I wanted to be an all-inclusive resource for parents with disabilities to thrive. We want to have accessible playgrounds, accessible trails, accessible family activities. We want to have all that on our website, and we want to have Obviously, I live in California. I can't be in every state and every country. Like, it's just not possible. I
Right.
want people to be able to contribute the things that they know so that we're building a database so that, the next generation of disabled parents doesn't have to feel like there's nothing for me. There's nobody to support me. Like, that's why I started this, because there was no support. And I was like, we've made it this far in the world, but how is there no support for parents with disabilities? Like, we need to empower each other and bring each other up, and raise our children to realize, just as much as their friends may have a disability or something like that in school, their friends' parents may also have differences, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so what would you want to see among able-bodied parents to support changes or support parents with disabilities?
Um, that is such a loaded question. I think I just, first and foremost, I think more acceptance and just more open-mindedness, and don't be afraid to like approach people and make friends. And for the love of God, please do not silence your child when they are asking questions about disability. Please
Right.
do not silence them.
Yes.
um it's okay to ask questions, and the majority of adults with disabilities are going to be very open to kids asking questions. But you know don't make up something dumb, don't silence them. Like, either have them ask the person directly, or if the disabled person doesn't feel like answering, because everybody has those days, like, sit down and maybe read a book. And that's something that we're working on at Adaptive Parent Project. Is I'm actually going to have a series on our YouTube and Instagram, obviously too, where we're reading disability inclusive books aloud. So we're going to have a series of like reading, like Come Over to My House by Eliza, which is a children's book. And then I have at least one book, We've Got This, on our YouTube channel, that I talk about reading it as a parent with a disability, reading stories of other disabled parents. That was like so mind-blowing. And I'm working on other books, but I don't have as much time to read as I would like right now.
Right.
But just be open, be inclusive, like, help us find resources, help us put in the work. Like, right now, Adaptive Parent Project is working on a great grant with the state of California to create a nationwide provider list of healthcare providers that have experience working with people with disabilities. For this grant, it's specifically developmental and intellectual disabilities. But I'm calling, every day I pick a state to start calling hospitals and asking questions, because there is no provider list of people that are disability informed. There is no training in medical school on working with people with disabilities. So make disability education and disability history, like, teach that in schools. Like, make medical students and doctors and all these people go through disability training. Like, it's absurd that this isn't like required. Like, as part of this grant that we're working on, we're actually going to help create continuing medical education courses for providers to be more disability informed, because in medical school there is no requirement, there is no training. Now, how absurd is that? Especially with COVID, how many more people with disabilities are we going to have? Like, this is going to affect our economy as a whole and our workforce, because so many people are going to be disabled from long COVID that it's going to affect things. So it's like, people say like, oh, do disabled people really matter? But the disability community is the only community that you could join at any point in life, no matter how old you are. We're here to welcome you with open arms, but we need support, we need funding, we need all these things to make the world a more inclusive place, because for the love of God, it's almost 2023 and we're still so far behind.
Right. And so I think we can all do our part to ask questions with compassion, raise awareness, talk about these things, advocate for inclusivity and inclusive spaces, and I think challenging too, right? Even challenging when there's spaces that are not inclusive or accessible, or again, like I said, asking those questions, but I think like we all can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to be disabled to do those things.
No. And we can all care about those things, right?
Yeah.
As we care, as we can all care collectively about all human beings, right? Those are questions we can ask. I ask myself, or I asked those questions when I moved into my private practice office. What are the size, and is it accessible, and where is the accessibility entrance, and all those things. Like those things are important,
Yeah.
so that people feel welcome, and it's just should be automatic, right? Yes,
Right.
of course you can come
Exactly.
access the service because it's all accessible and you can get in no matter what type of assistive device you're using and how that looks, right?
Exactly.
Yes. And so Alesha, like I said, I'm going to put, in the show notes, your website, your YouTube channel, Instagram, and some of those other people that you mentioned and books. Are there any other resources that you really want people to know about?
Um, as far as like Canada itself, I'm not sure how that works, but like just know that if you're in the United States, there is like your county website in your state for like help for new moms and things like that. So don't be afraid to like ask for resources or like call your county hotlines and figure out what those sources are. Sorry, I got a little tongue tied there, but
That's okay.
don't be afraid to like ask for those things. And a lot of times you have to be referred, but just like don't be afraid to like speak up and ask for help. I know the resources are far and few between. We're working really hard to help get that all together, but I also want people to understand that I am mostly a one woman show with
Yeah.
few volunteers and limited funding. So our progress is slow, but we're getting there. We're starting something from absolutely nothing. So just stick with us. If you have questions, if you have resources, please reach out to us. Literally, if it's anything you think it could help, no matter what it is, whether it's a baby product, whether it's a doctor you know of, whether it's a physical therapist you know of, a baby wearing educator, a lactation consultant, like if there's anything if there's an accessible park in your community that you know about, please tell us. It's impossible for one person to be everywhere. Like we need
Absolutely.
that information. Like go on our website, email us. They'll soon in our interactive map there will be a portion where people can contribute different things. So stick with us, reach out to me on Instagram. I'm here. I'm very accessible. As far as like communicating with me, if I don't get back to you right away, I'm not ignoring you. I'm juggling a 3.5-year-old toddler.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but yeah, I think it's just, the resources are far and few between, but they're getting there.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
all we can do is move forward.
Absolutely. And, in Canada too, just asking your healthcare provider, or yes, calling public health, asking them what supports are existing in your area. And you can reach out to us too and ask us to connect you with services. And, anywhere in the world, right? Just try to seek out, like, if it's some type of healthcare provider that you're already interacting with, asking them to help connect you, and like
Yes,
you
please
said.
help us do the work. I cannot call every hospital in the entire world as much as I wish that I could. I'm exhausted just calling the people that, and it seems to be that everybody I call, it's not like there's this magical list and I'm like just calling to get access to the list. Like this list doesn't exist. So every person I call, they're like, we're going to have to reach out to X, Y, and Z provider and they're going to get back to us and we'll let you know what they say. Like, that's why I pick a different state every day and like I can only do so much. But
Absolutely.
this is it. This is turning out to be a much more challenging project as far as trying to get a nationwide provider list than I ever anticipated. Because surprisingly, even for the field of like physical medicine and rehabilitation, I was under the assumption that everybody that specialized in physical medicine and rehabilitation saw people with disabilities. I am very mistaken. It is a very broad field, and there are some people that don't see people with disabilities at all, even if they focus on physical medicine and rehabilitation. Some people only focus on back pain or knee pain or something and don't see people with disabilities at all. So right now we're focusing on physical medicine and rehabilitation, primary care, maternal fetal medicine, and dentistry, because there's such a large gap in dental care for adults with disabilities. So I got asked to also kind of bring that in the mix. But yeah, if you know of something, please tell us.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I will put, all those links in the show notes for sure. And Alesha, I want to thank you so much for the work you're doing. I think it's incredible. I'm so grateful to have connected with you. And I'm so thankful that you came on the podcast today.
I was so excited to be on your podcast. I absolutely love doing podcasts and kind of just talking about the issues that we're struggling with and hoping that somebody hears it that hasn't heard it before. And I'm so glad we connected. Social media is a beautiful place in that regard. And I'm so excited to be able to collaborate with you and do all sorts of exciting things for perinatal mental health and people with disabilities. And I'm so excited to see the work that we can do together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So everyone who's listening, definitely watch this space, so to speak. And so thank you so much, Alesha. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was so much fun.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please share this podcast with any of your friends or family members who may benefit from it. If you feel you are experiencing any of the symptoms or issues that we discussed today, please reach out to any one of your supports or go to perinatalwellbeing.ca for more information, blog posts, podcast episodes, and ways to connect with us. Check out our new episode every other Monday.